to It's a Woman's World, where we'll meet achieving women making a difference in our community. I'm Carolyn Bruna. Our guest is Dana Theus, Executive Coach and President and CEO of InPower Coaching. Welcome, Dana. It's great to have you on my show again. I actually had to look it up. You were on my show back in 2012, exactly 10 years ago. And you were also a speaker at the Power Conference that I started for business women in the greater Washington area to network and learn. Luckily, we've remained friends through the years and somewhat connected. I follow you online and your business has thrived. And I hope you catch my show now and then. And truthfully, I invited you so we could catch up.
Well, it's so nice to be back. And it's so nice that you've been bringing women's voices to the world for this long.
Oh, thank you, Dana. Thank you. Actually, I'd like to ask you to please introduce yourself to our viewers who might not know you and tell what you're doing now and what are some of the exciting new things that you're working on.
Well, I'm an executive coach and I work with leaders. I specialize with female leaders who are looking to make a difference and achieve career success by being their authentic selves. I come out of a tech marketing background, so I have a lot of, insight into various sizes of organizations and such, but my specialty is really working with women leaders. And the new exciting thing that I'm doing is bringing women together, women leaders together in community on my website and through my social media. So I'm really jazzed about that.
Yeah, that sounds exciting because right now, because of COVID and people being so isolated, community is what everyone wants. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
You're such a successful businesswoman, Dana. Did you have models when you were starting out, or who inspired you?
I always struggle with that question because I actually had not great role models. I had mentors in terms of mentoring me and how to do my work, but I didn't have great role models. I didn't work. I never in my professional career until the very end, before I went out on my own, I never had a female boss or any women in the organization above me. So I really didn't have female role models, and a lot of the men weren't particularly role models. So I pretty much learned by doing and was just inspired by, people who were their authentic selves in their work. I figured there must be a way for me to do it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, experience is really one of the best teachers, as they say.
Yep.
Now, for our topics today, we've selected two actually: the office housewife, which I truthfully had never heard of, and the imposter syndrome, which I do know a bit about, but have not delved into it in detail. You said also you'd bring in setting boundaries, and you have takeaways, many takeaways that women can learn from right now. So how about if we begin with the office housewife? Please define office housewife for us and tell us its history and usage in business.
Well, it's a relatively new term to me. I've discovered since hearing it. I think 2018 is the first time I read it in an article from the Harvard Business Review, but it was based on some research that was begun in 2010. So relatively speaking, it's new. But the idea is what it was focused on, this research was focused on what are promotable tasks or promotable work and what is unpromotable tasks and work. And is there a gender difference in who takes on those tasks and activities that put you up for promotion and those who take on work that doesn't put you up for promotion? And what they found is there are such things as non-promotable tasks, work that is necessary to the business, but not mission critical. It doesn't bring in the money or put out the product sort of thing, or file the taxes, et cetera. And that women tend to volunteer or are voluntold to do these non-promotable tasks 2 to 3 times more often than men. And sometimes this looks like just keeping the kitchen clean, the office kitchen or copy room clean. So when guests come in, they're not embarrassed to be shown those things. And sometimes it's about onboarding new hires or going on employee listening tours. And women tend to do this more. In the research more recently, they've also found things they call emotional labor, which tends to fall into this non-promotable task category. And this can be spending time mentoring employees, spending time with employees who are troubled, taking on and building employee wellness programs, all of which is really important. And it's not to diminish the value of it, but to point out that the way you get promoted into more and more senior positions is by delivering revenue and brand recognition and new clients and product out the door. That's what you get promoted for. You don't get promoted for these other things. And for women who have that task balance out of balance, balance and struggle with why am I not getting promoted, this may be a reason, because you're taking on these non-promotable tasks, which the media has put in this category of being the office housewife.
That's so interesting, right? I had never heard about that before, and that label, office housewife. But I think a lot of women can relate to the idea of not getting credit for their emotional labor and having others expect them to do the cleanup work. That's so true. I think I actually did much of it in my early career, now that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think we all did. And I will say too, this is also part of a larger trend of why women struggle to get into leadership positions if they want them, which is that in addition to taking on this kind of the less valued work in the office, they're often mentored into the kind of professions and careers that are less likely to get promoted into senior levels of leadership. For example, women are 45% more likely to go into human resources, and CEOs are almost never recruited out of human resources roles. So there's the task list of what's promotable and what's not. And then there's also the work profile, the career profile of the kind of person who's more likely to get into leadership versus those that aren't. So not every woman or man, for that matter, wants to be in a senior leadership position. But for those who do, they have to be thinking about not only the work they do day to day, is it promotable, but also is the career trajectory they're on going to get them promoted to the kind of work that they want to do and lead ultimately, where they want to have the biggest impact.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. And I imagine that promotable work is different in different areas of business where women and men are working. Is that true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you just a simple example from my own background. I came out of marketing, which is not typically one of those careers that gets you into the CEO's chair anyway. But I learned early on that, there's digital marketing and then there's brand marketing. And if I wanted to get ahead in digital marketing, I had to produce results that were measurable. If I were going to get promoted, I had to be able to point and say, look, I got a 45% higher conversion rate than the other guy or than the previous campaign. But if I wanted to get into sort of brand and PR promotion opportunities, I had to come up with an idea that made the CEO and the board go, wow, So like and that's a specialty oriented thing, but in every industry, in every company, and every role, the things that could get you promoted is different. So you really have to understand for yourself and where you are in your career, what is promotable and what is less promotable. Let's put it that way.
Right. Well, how would you figured it out on your own, or did you watch the men being promoted and see the things that they were doing? I'm just curious about this.
That's an excellent question. For myself, I did start just really carefully, like what got people ahead and what didn't. But I'll be completely honest with you. I needed a coach. I didn't have a coach. I didn't even have a great mentor towards when I was a vice president, and kind of getting up there. I didn't really have a great mentor. I went out on my own. I became a consultant. That has it's not about getting promoted. It's about surviving, right? And getting business. And then I became a coach. And when I became a coach about 10 years ago, I started looking back on all these dynamics, not only through my own experience, but through my clients' experience. And that's when I started to really see and read the research and, kind of get smart on this about like, what are the dynamics in the workplace that can help you achieve your goals and what can't, and read research like this and such. So I wish I could say I had it all figured out when I was in the workplace, but I had to come to it much later.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably what all of us have. But I'm curious about, did you get a coach? Did you have coaches? Did you hire a coach? Because for other women who are in these positions, should they hire coaches? Is that something that you would recommend?
Well, being a coach, of course, I'll say yes.
Oh, right. Exactly. Forgot. You are. Yes.
But I will say, so back before, like 30 years ago, when I was earlier in my career, people really didn't have coaches. Like CEOs had coaches. Nobody else did.
Right.
Today, a lot more people do. And people are beginning to understand that we all need somebody outside ourselves to be a champion for us, not the sense of going and getting us a job, although that's great. Those are sponsors, right? But we all need another voice that kind of balances, we can think out loud with, and that balances our voice in our head. Sometimes it's too critical, sometimes it's too positive. We all need another voice to kind of help us figure out, well, what are we doing well? Where are we growing? Where can I put my energy right now to get the biggest bang for the buck? That's what coaches do. So everybody needs one, I think.
Yeah, actually, no, I agree, because I really feel I started when you did, or even earlier, I'm afraid. And we didn't have coaches back then. And I don't think I had role models either, and I wish I did. And now I really feel it's very important to have coaches. So let's go on with, we were talking about the office housewife, and I was wondering, has the pandemic made things better or worse for women in the workplace?
Worse, no question. The pandemic put greater expectations and requirements on women to, be there for the kids that weren't going to school, to be there for, family members that were struggling with illness, the disconnections in business and our world, a lot of that pickup work fell on women, and including the emotional labor in the workplace of employees who were struggling. There are several studies that show that women at all levels, particularly leadership levels, picked up a lot of that emotional labor to try to care for employees, many of whom were, very stressed, if not traumatized, in the early days of the pandemic in particular. And the numbers show it. Women left the workforce at like twice the rate of men, and they are burning out more. Even most recently, as maybe 6 months ago, the last data I saw showed that women are burning out about 10% more often than men. And during the depths of the pandemic, it was much higher than that. So we have a bit of a deficit to come back from when it comes to the recovery. And I think awareness of these kinds of issues I'm talking about can help women, decide, how do I want to come back? What is it that I'm going to do to make sure my comeback is successful for me and doesn't lead me to more burnout?
Right. We have 2 minutes, so I want to ask about boundaries for the end of the first half. I think some women struggle with these boundaries, and you have some information about that, how women can work through or make boundaries. We make them and then we break them, I believe you were saying to me. So explain that, please.
Well, that's a huge topic, so I'm going to try to contain it for the moment to this office housewife concept. Is that if you realize that this may be you, right? Mm-hmm. The first thing you have to do is figure out, well, what is, in my situation, what is promotable versus non-promotable work? What is it? And get clear on what is promotable and what you want to be promoted into. Because like I said before, depending on where you are and what you have to do to get promoted into what you want to be doing is going to be different. So find the place where those things overlap. That becomes your priority. Sort of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This other non-promotable stuff, cleaning the kitchen or going on the employee listening tour, I'd like to do that. Many women do like to do these tasks, and there's nothing wrong with it. We all have to do some. But you can draw a boundary and say, I'm willing to do some. But I'm not willing to jeopardize the things that are highest priority for me and my organization. And secondly, those non-promotable tasks, I will do my fair share, and I will let other people do their fair share. If nobody else picks up that ball, I don't take responsibility for it. So I draw a boundary, and I say within that boundary is what I want to do and have to do, not only to get promoted, but to do my job well. And I will do that with integrity. And beyond that, I don't take responsibility for that. I don't take responsibility outside this line. Boundaries like this are kind of magical. They create choices for other people. They say, okay, you can count on me for this. You can't count on me for that. And we do it wrong most of the time. We usually say, I'm not going to do that. But that doesn't give anybody any choice. It doesn't give them any information. It just tells them what you won't do. But the minute you flip that around and say, here's what I will do. You can count on me for this. Everything else is kind of up to you guys to figure out. Now you've created a boundary that creates choices for other people. And that can be very empowering to you and to them. So you can put that in any context. You can use it at home with your family. You can use it in any relationship. You can use it at work, but it can be really, really powerful. And when we stick to those boundaries, we train people, you can trust me inside this boundary. I will deliver this. Outside of that, it's not a matter of not trusting me. It's a matter of, I never committed to that. So either somebody else picks it up or you and I negotiate a specific commitment outside that boundary. Otherwise, it's on you, not on me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love your takeaways, especially the boundaries. That's really great. Make these boundaries and stick to them and present them in positive terms. That's great. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to break now for a short public service announcement, and we'll return with Dana helping us delve into the topic of the imposter syndrome. Welcome back to It's a Woman's World. We're speaking with Dana Theus, who told us about the office housewife in our first half. And now in our second half, we're going to delve into the topic of the imposter syndrome and its boundaries. Dana, would you please define the imposter syndrome and as it's used in business? Tell us about that.
This was the first evidence of it I found was in some research in 1978, which I remember, by the way. I was alive. I was just graduating high school. And it was research, gender-based research, that found that women more often than men had a belief about themselves that was out of sync with their actual achievements. So women were more likely to have doubts about their abilities that was out of sync with what they'd actually achieved in the world than men were. And it tends to lead to this. So they feel like I'm a fake. The world thinks I'm this great thing, this vice president, this big accomplished person, but I don't feel that good. And it's kind of fed by and leads to feelings of vulnerability, potential shame, if not shame, feeling not enough, and like nothing I can do can ever be enough. And these feelings are dangerous. They're not sustainable, particularly if you want to keep taking on more responsibility and achieving more and making more money and having a bigger impact on the world. And a lot of women kind of get stuck in this mindset, and they believe it's who they are, as opposed to men who also experience the imposter syndrome, but are more likely to feel like it's related to their circumstance. And this is true of a lot of self-beliefs, but men are more likely to say, wow, I am in this new situation I've never been in before. I kind of feel like a fake because I've never done it before. Let me dive in and figure it out. And then they kind of get over it. Whereas a lot of women just think, I am an imposter no matter what I do. And that's debilitating and very, very hard mindset to get out of.
That is amazing. And I had not heard of that. Well, I guess I heard of it, but I really didn't know much about it. It's really annoying that women have been labeled that too. And we have to learn how to handle these things. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it is. And I think it's because we all, men and women, we internalize a lot of the messages we get from the outside world, particularly when we're young. And women tend to get more messages saying, play it safe, sometimes for very good reasons. There's reasons little girls need to play it safe sometimes. But we tend to get more messages that are more judgmental than boys, who tend to get more messages like, get up, you can do it, keep going. And, that kind of cascades throughout our entire life. And if we're not careful and we don't counter these messages, it can really lead us into a mindset like this where, we're constantly doubting ourselves.
Yeah. Does the imposter syndrome make women more susceptible to taking on the non-promotable work that we were talking about firsthand?
I think it's probably part of the dynamic. And I say that because a lot of the imposter syndrome is exacerbated by taking on risk. And, men who experience the imposter syndrome particularly experience it at high levels. If you're going to be the CEO, if you're going to be, take on a lot of risk, man or woman, there's a possibility the price of failure is higher. So, your self-doubt has to be lower. So imposter syndrome is facilitated by taking on high risk. Well, if women, which many of us are, kind of are programmed with some of these thoughts right from the beginning, in part because, the outside world is saying, well, appropriate feminine behavior is not to take compliments, to push it away, right? Well, if you're not taking compliments, you're not letting it in. Well, of course you feel like, well, that's not real. That's not really me. They don't know me. They don't know how bad I am, right? So we get into these kind of habits. Well, then we don't feel comfortable taking on risk. We don't ever learn how to take on risk, particularly when we're younger. And so we are more likely to want to go into a career field or take on work tasks that are lower risk. And we go back to promotable versus non-promotable tasks. Promotable tasks are promotable because they're higher risk. They have a bigger impact on the business. I can get promoted if I make my sales quota or I achieve my business development goals. And there's higher risk if I don't. So I do think that there's a relationship that women who are kind of caught in the imposter syndrome mindset are less comfortable taking on risk. But when they learn to manage risk and they learn to stay in their stretch zone and learn to live into their possibilities and their potentiality, then they think how to manage the imposter syndrome becomes part of their success. And this is true for men too, that as we get outside of being entrapped by the imposter syndrome and learn to let it stimulate us to grow and to change and to learn how to manage risk and succeed anyway, that's when it becomes a skill and it becomes an ally in our quest, to become our best selves.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And my next question is a little follow-up on that. Basically, I guess I want to ask you, how can women handle the imposter syndrome? And I do agree with that not taking risks when we were younger, right?
Yeah. And I do think that's changing a little bit. The younger generations, I think are willing to take on more risk, which I'm all in favor of. But I think, the way to handle it, regardless of where you in your career or how much or little you are encountering this, to the extent you feel like your self-perception is out of sync with how the rest of the world sees you, which is a lot of where the imposter feelings come in. The first thing to do is do an audit. What does the rest of the world think of you? Try to find out, ask mentors, ask people you trust, get a trustworthy view of your reputation and yourself. And then this is the key part. This was a cool piece for me. When people are willing to give you compliments and say, well, you should take credit for X, Y, and Z, you got to let that in. You can't push those compliments away. You have to say, okay, they believe it. To tell them they're wrong is rude. And to ignore it is denying myself important information about who I am and what I am achieving. So I'm not going to push away compliments anymore. I'm going to let them in. I'm going to believe they're true and feel like, what would it feel like to believe those compliments are true? And when you do that on a regular basis, you will become more confident. It really does help. But then you'll also get some information about judgments people make about you that are either, part of their biases or part of their personality quirk, or maybe you're in a toxic environment. I had a client who did this, who she was so organized, and some of the people in her organization said, oh, she's an alpha because she's so organized, and a bunch of other people are like, no, that's actually a good skill. And she just had to say, you know what, I'm not going to listen to that feedback, the people who think that because I'm organized, I'm an alpha and trying to dominate them, because I'm not. You just got to screen that stuff out, the stuff it's just not true about you. And then there's something left. The things that are left are places you are growing. Maybe you're not so good yet. Maybe you're still figuring out. Maybe you're not even sure you want to do. And in that space that's left, when you've taken credit for what is due, you've screened out the stuff that you don't want, is not true, it's not relevant. You're left with a basket of stuff you need to be working on. And maybe you have legitimate self-doubt there, but then you've got to start working on, well, how do I get good at this so I'm not doubting myself, And then you build confidence in that zone. That's your stretch zone. And when you just keep working on your stretch zone, you just keep taking things you don't know how to do and learn how to do them. And that makes room for more things you don't know how to do. And pretty soon, that's your skill set. You're comfortable in your discomfort zone. And you now have a skill that will help you grow in your career, but also as a person. And to me, that's where, that's the butter zone. That's the place to be all the time. And the skill to learn, both for career and just for personal fulfillment.
I like that a lot, the skill to learn. And I do know that I, as well as you, was taught not to learn to accept compliments. I'm only slowly learning through the years. I'm trying now to believe the people who say that they believe something about me is positive, right?
Yep, exactly.
And your try, fail, succeed, and believe, I think, were the things there, great takeaways. Yet if it's easy for women to struggle, why do we still struggle with the imposter syndrome? You did mention some things, but just a quick little summary there.
I think that's a $64,000 question. And I don't know the real answer, other than that I do think a lot of it is internalizing those external voices that want to tear us down. And there are a lot of women out there who are just wiring that dialogue in their head. Like, we all have an inner critic, but we also have an inner champion. We have inner voices, especially when we let in those good compliments. We have inner voices that can strengthen us. We just have to start listening to them and put them in dialogue with each other. Believe it or not, the voices in your head are just sit them down and have them talk to each other, and you'll learn a whole lot. And get a coach, and you'll really learn a whole lot.
There you go. Promote yourself. Of course, you should. Actually, you're a wonderful coach, and I see amazing things about you online and your work, so I believe it.
Thank you.
Is there something else that I should ask you that I haven't yet?
I don't know that this is a question you haven't asked, but I will put it this way. We all we work and succeed and fail in relationship with other people. And going back to that kind of core concept of boundaries, we own part of that, and other people own part of that. And for all of us, whether it's on the office housewife or imposter syndrome or anything else, when we own our part of our contribution to the success and the failure of everything that we're part of, and we take responsibility for our part of it, we really do give other people a gift and empower them to take responsibility for their part. Right. And that's, our part is what we control. And when we really commit to ourselves to do that, draw the boundary and don't take responsibility beyond that, It can have a very powerful effect for ourselves professionally and personally, and kind of naturally reorder relationships that we have with the people around us in a way that's very healthy for us. So
Okay.
take that principle and put it into effect.
Yeah. Dana, tell people how they can get in touch with you, please.
So you can go to InPowerCoaching.com, InPower coaching.com. That's the easiest way.
Okay, great. And is there something else you'd like to highlight about your own business and InPower?
Well, I mean, I do one-on-one coaching, but I've launched an InPower Women Mastermind community for women on the leadership track in upper middle management and beyond. And I would invite anybody who's, knows a woman in leadership or who wants to be in leadership or is a woman in leadership to come check it out at InPowerCoaching.com.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I love masterminds. They're relatively new to me as well, but I've been in a few and I think they're fabulous.
There's actually research that shows that men benefit career-wise from broad networks. Women benefit from broad networks and narrow networks, deep relationships with other professional women, because we don't have enough role models.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. We're just about to end now. I hope you've enjoyed meeting our guest, Dana Theus, as much as I've enjoyed catching up with her. What did you learn about the executive housewife and the imposter syndrome that you'd like to share? Let us know. We're Woman's World TV at AOL.com. Remember, it's a woman's world. See you next time. I'm Carolyn Bruna.